These are the first pictures of the offensive in the Gaza Strip when the war was only hours old. The Israeli armor drove a wedge across the strip to Khan Yunis, cutting off thousands of men of the Palestine Liberation Force in Gaza City to the north.
Just supposing that war does break out, would you be prepared to fight in the army if you were asked to?
If I was asked to, of course.
I feel I'm doing the right thing. In fact, I'm sure I'm doing the right thing.
I am ready to be called up to participate in this holy war to liberate Palestine.
This is something I think that every Jew must identify himself with. This is the climax in a struggle which the Jews have been having with oppression.
I am ready to serve my country as a doctor, as a soldier, or whatever my country would ask me to do.
It's a racial state which has been created by Western powers at the middle of one people who have a common culture, common history, and they have just been transplanted in the region. I'd like to see the end of Israel as a racial state.
We're fighting a people that are dedicated to wipe us out, and I can't stand by and let my brothers in Israel fight that fight without me doing something.
I'd like to see Christians, Muslims, and Jews living happily in the Middle East.
At the frontier of the Gaza Strip, just a mere kilometer away, and this is a shell unit, a mortar shell unit, firing on Egyptian forces, numbered to be about 200 to 300 out there. They've been here all day, and they began this war this morning at around 6 o'clock. Now we're told we've got to get out of here. Behind us, you can't see it.
Hello, good evening. It's just over 60 hours since the long simmering Middle East crisis boiled over into full-scale war. 60 fantastic hours in which the Israeli forces have routed the armed might of their Arab neighbors. The deadline for the UN ceasefire called ended 2.5 hours ago, and as you may have heard in the headlines, no response has yet been reported from Israel or from Egypt. So tomorrow may be day 4 of the war. Tonight, we're going to look at some of its repercussions, both in Israel and in the world outside. But first, let's go back to the Gaza Strip soon after the fighting began on Monday. Among the reporters there, Bob Young of the American Broadcasting Company.
We're not sure what's going to happen here. We've got shells bursting about 200 yards away from us here, and we've just finished visiting the kibbutz. It was very quiet then. We looked at the only casualties of this war so far in this town, and they were 20 cows. Fortunately, no adults or children were hurt. Most of the children are now in a bomb shelter. They're joined by their parents, and they've been there all day with their coloring books, and we talked to one of the ladies in charge. Did the children hear the attack this morning, the guns?
We've heard noises. Yes, they heard some noises.
How did they take that? Did they get frightened?
They came with us. Each person knew which children to bring down here. We knew beforehand what to do in case we heard a noise, and we did it.
This was a bomb shelter built for this express purpose.
It was. Yes, it was.
So you always had the feeling that maybe sometime you'd have to use it.
They're normally shut, but as soon as there's anything, they're open and cleaned.
I see.
So we knew.
How long do you think you'll have to stay down here?
Today? I don't know. Children are very tired. I don't know. We've been, I think 11 hours about now. It's about 5 years.
Then you'll bring them out, or will you keep them here overnight?
If we're told that there's not danger, they'll go and sleep in their children's houses.
And what are you told now? Is there danger?
I haven't heard anything. Right now, yes, we can hear outside.
A few hours later, in the Gaza Strip, the Israeli offensive gathered momentum, a pace which seems to have been maintained and indeed even increased today, day 3 of the war. These are the first pictures of the offensive in the Gaza Strip when the war was only hours old. The Israeli armor drove a wedge across the strip to Khan Yunis, cutting off thousands of men of the Palestine Liberation Force in Gaza City to the north. With the spearhead of the Israeli force was Alan Hart.
The war has now been started just about 7 hours, and we're now in the Israeli frontline position facing Gaza, which is held by the Egyptians at the moment. Gaza is about 4 miles directly behind us. At this moment, there is an Israeli attack being mounted on Gaza, and it looks as though the Israelis are trying to cut off the Gaza Strip from the rest of Egypt.
The Israelis are used to fighting. They have to be. 19 years ago, they took on all those Arab countries and won their independence as a state. Today, the road in the Judean hills to Jerusalem is still dotted with the shells of burnt-out tanks and armored cars, preserved as memorials to those who died in 1948. Jerusalem was divided. The Mandelbaum Gate gave the only access, and it was one way, Jordan to Israel only. Now it's a thing of the past. Once a week, Israeli students were allowed under UN escort to go up to Mount Scopus University within Arab territory. As for the frontier, you could drive from the famous King David Hotel, recently under fire, on a short car ride. Turn right, right again, and a few yards down, there, the Dragon's Teeth, the frontier, and ahead lay King David's Tower in Jordan. These houses weren't damaged in the present fighting or in the war of 1956. The damage is 19 years old. And she's probably in the army by now. And life in Jordan could be seen plainly with the naked eye. So near and yet so far, in a city once as divided as Berlin, the Mount of Olives and the Garden of Gethsemane. The Church of the Dormition on the Israel side was badly damaged in Monday's fighting. And outside, notices from 1948 still say, "Mines keep clear." Bethlehem, birthplace of Jesus, is only 8 miles south of Jerusalem. It is now, like Jericho, in Israeli hands. The Israelis keep the holy places well. It's up in the far north, on the Syrian border, that the going may still be tough. This frontier guard, no special posing here, sat by the roadside near Dan, his book, the Bible in Hebrew. And not far from here is a monument to Israeli soldiers killed by the Syrians. Here, the River Jordan, already harnessed by Israel to water the desert, begins its course. According to the latest reports, this area has been a battlefield. It has borders with both Syria and Jordan. But a few days ago, before the fighting, these Arabs proved by their continued presence that they preferred to live in the state of Israel. 250,000 Arabs have proved it. Lake Galilee. At a kibbutz on the right, Degania, Moshe Dayan was born, a Sabra, a native Israeli. Ahead, the Syrian hills. This is the area of the reported Syrian attack. By the lake, the Church of the Beatitudes, where it is said the Sermon on the Mount was preached. The side of the church bearing the message, "Blessed are the peacemakers," points towards Syria. Haifa, the great seaport built by the British, has been bombed, and beyond the bay is Acre, threatened by the first Syrian advance. But in Tel Aviv, in Dizengoff Square, they'll be out in the streets again, and children will no longer have to be hurried to the shelters. The Negev desert has a landscape like the surface of the moon. It's here that the decisive struggle was begun and still continues. And many a kibbutz, which were after all originally frontier stations, must have suffered. This is Yotvate, the last kibbutz before the Red Sea port of Eilat. The precious water pipeline is just 3 miles from Jordan. Eilat. To the Israelis, the holiday place, the Côte d'Azur, the place where Solomon met the Queen of Sheba, and yet the vital seaport connecting with the outside world. All these places have been defended by the Israel Armed Forces, men who come from as many as 70 different nations.
We were in the middle of the Whitsun holidays, and we left Friday, which was the last day of the holidays, and I didn't have a chance to get into school to tell them. I hope my parents have written or something. When I made the decision, which was already a week ago, I started thinking about hundreds of Arabs swarming down, and I had some fears and some qualms, but the minute I arrived here, they all went. I feel I'm doing the right thing. In fact, I'm sure I'm doing the right thing.
I intended coming in a few years' time, perhaps to stay, but this crisis brought me out here now.
What have you been doing since you arrived here? Have you settled down yet?
Yes, we've just sort of finished settling down. We've moved into a place where we'll be staying for the 4 months, and everybody's been very kind, helping us settle in.
And what sort of work are you going to do when you roll up your sleeves and get stuck in?
Well, we haven't actually been told yet, but I think it's in the banana grove.
Just supposing that war does break out, would you be prepared to fight in the army if you were asked to?
If I was asked to, of course. Obviously, one isn't in a position to choose where one goes or what one does, and there are people who know better than I do where I'm going to be of any use, any value.
But where would you think you're going to be of most value?
Probably working on the kibbutz, since they've had quite a few people called up, and they're obviously short on manpower.
So I've had quite a few letters from my mother, especially. She asked me to go home straight away because she's frightened of the war. She wants to go before anything starts properly here. But I've tried to explain why I want to stay on here. It's a bit difficult to explain, but it's really because we feel needed here, and we really feel we're doing something. And it's also because I just couldn't run out on it now.
In London, hundreds more went to the volunteer centre, hoping to be sent to Israel before it was all over.
Fine. Can I have your name and address, please?
Yes, the name's Morgan, M-O-R-G-A-N.
And the initials, please?
W.
And can I have your name and your address, please?
63, Malden, spelled M-A-L-D-O-N, Road, London, W3. I'm so sad to see what's going on there at the present time, and I'm so caught up in Israel's fight that I want to go there and perhaps in some way, in some very small way it would probably be, feel that I've helped to contribute towards their effort.
I'm a Jew and my people in Israel are in trouble and I have to help them. I have 3 sons of my own and I don't want them to grow up in the fear that they may ever be persecuted wherever they may live in the world. There has to be one country where Jews will live as free men, and this is one of the reasons why I have volunteered.
I want to go to Israel because I want to help. I want to go to a kibbutz, and as I before spent time in a kibbutz, I know what it is, and I think I could help.
This is something I think that every Jew must identify himself with, even though, for example, he might be a very proud Englishman. At the same time, this is the climax in a struggle which the Jews have been having with oppression. We're fighting a people that are dedicated to wipe us out, and I can't stand by and let what I consider my brothers in Israel fight that fight without me doing something anyway.
This is a big wrench for me, as you can understand, but it is something which every decent Jew anywhere in the world must do. They must come to support Mother Israel. If I may say, as our rabbi said, Rochil Mabako al Boneho. Rachel cries for her children, and her children this time will answer her.
Name, please. Arab volunteers in London were equally fervent.
Nationality?
Arab United Arab Republic.
Address, please.
St. George's School, Reading.
Volunteering or blood donating?
Both.
Both. Thank you very much indeed. Next, please. صالح مجيد من العراق. Iraq? نعم. Address, please. 2A Stern Street. 2A Stern Street. W12. Volunteering or blood donating? Both, please. Both. Thank you very much indeed. Next, please. Country?
Sudan.
I am ready to be called up and go to the Middle East to participate in this holy war with my brethren in Egypt, Syria, Jordan, to liberate Palestine.
I am ready to serve my country. If I can be of value here, I'll serve it here. If I am a doctor and I can serve my country back as a doctor, as a soldier, or whatever my country would ask me to do.
Well, I hold against the Israelis is their policy in the Middle East. It's a racial state which has been created by Western powers at the middle of one people who have a common culture, common history, and they have just been transplanted in the region and financed by foreign money.
I hold against them that they have sent 2 million Arabs, Palestine people who are living now under tents, and they want the other 80 million Arab to live the same as those 2 million refugees.
Well, I'd like to see the end of Israel as a racial state. I'd like to see Christians, Muslims, and Jews living happily in the Middle East, turning their minds' effort to build up the country.
Britain gets about 70% of her oil from 4 main countries: Kuwait, which supplies us with 23%, Saudi Arabia, where we get 20%, Libya supplies 15%, and Iraq also sells us 15%. This is certainly the biggest threat to Britain's oil supply since the Suez Crisis in 1956, when the Egyptians blocked the canal. 60% of Britain's oil supplies came through the canal. Stocks in Britain dwindled as tankers made the long and expensive journey round the Cape. The result was rationing and a grim winter as motorists queued for their coupons and their 200 miles of motoring a month. The government has made plans for rationing this summer, but says it won't be necessary. But could scenes like this be repeated? I spoke to Christopher Tugendhat of the Financial Times. Mr. Tugendhat, how real is the possibility of oil and petrol rationing?
It's very difficult to say at this moment because the reports coming out of the Arab countries are so unclear, and also the Arabs themselves might change their minds at almost any moment. But at the moment, anyway, it doesn't look very likely. Some of the countries have decided to cut off their supplies to Britain, but they've singled out Britain, and this simply means that we can buy a bit more from other places.
Well, what stocks of petroleum do we carry in this country?
This, too, is very difficult to say because, as we've seen with the Rhodesians, it is very difficult to estimate oil stocks, and it is, of course, a security secret. All the indications are that we've probably got over 3 months' supplies. This is partly because we always do maintain strategic stocks in case of an emergency. Also, of course, we had a very mild winter this year, and so a lot of oil which was imported to be used during the winter hasn't been used. So we're far better off than is usually the case.
Who'd feel the pinch first? Would it be industry, the railways, or would it be the car driver?
To some extent, of course, this is up to the government. I think probably the first person to feel the pinch would be the motorist, because when all is said and done, a great deal of motoring is luxury. I mean, in the sense that you don't have to go out on a Sunday afternoon, and also a lot of people use their cars to commute into the big cities when they could go by bus or by underground, so that we could, in fact, cut down our petrol consumption quite a lot without really impairing the economic efficiency of the country, whereas if we cut down the use of oil in industry, this could have an effect on the economy. So I fear the first person to suffer is likely to be the motorist.
Even if the Arab nations were not prepared to cut supplies overall, if they were not all prepared to cut supplies, do you think we'll be faced with sabotage from Arab nationalists on dumps and oil pipelines?
Yes, I do. I think this is quite a big possibility. And of course, oil installations are very vulnerable. I mean, these pipelines going over hundreds of miles of desert, it's very easy to blow them up even though they are patrolled. And then the docks and the refineries and so forth stick out like a sore thumb in these places, and it would, I fear, be very easy to blow them up.
What other sources of oil supply are there for Britain?
Well, now, assuming for the moment that we can't turn to any of the Arabs, which is an extreme assumption, but let's make it, there are still several places. The most obvious place for us to turn to is Iran, Persia. Now, the Iranians feel very resentful of the way in which the Arabs took advantage of their misfortunes during the Abadan crisis, when Iran couldn't export and the Arabs just captured as much as they could. And the Iranians, I think, would be delighted to sell us as much as they could. It would be difficult for them to sell us that much more because of the limitations on the pipelines and the port facilities and that sort of thing. But Iran is one place. Another is Nigeria. Well, now, Nigeria has a lot of oil and could increase its production probably quite significantly. At the moment, everything's okay there, so far as the oil is concerned, but obviously in the very disturbed political situation of Nigeria, it's possible that that source could be cut off. This still leaves the Western Hemisphere, Venezuela and the United States. We'd prefer to go to Venezuela because the oil is cheaper, but the United States has a lot of spare capacity, and if need be, Britain or Western Europe, indeed, could call on America.
Do you think we should now prepare for a national oil crisis?
Unless there's a big change in the way things are going in the Middle East, I don't think we need worry about that.